It is the decisive day of the FIDE Candidates 2024 and 4 players still have a chance to become the new challenger of world champion Ding Liren. In this video I will tell you everything what happened on that final day, and well, there is just an absolutely insane game I'm going to show you. Well, going into the round, it is Gukesh who is in the lead with 8.5 points, and he is being chased by 3 players on 8 points, just half a point less. Hikaru Nakamura is one of them and is playing in the final round against Gukesh. That means that Hikaru is in a must-win situation. The 2 other players, Fabiano Caruana and Ian Nepomniachtchi, they are also half a point behind Gukesh, but they know one thing for sure. Both players, Caruana and Nepomniachtchi, they have to play for a win. If they make a draw, they have no chance to become the new challenger. In this video, I will show you what happened. Fabiano Caruana is playing with the white pieces against Ian Nepomniachtchi, and this is a game for the books. You will remember this one in many years from now. Let's see what is happening there. 1d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, and d5. The queen's gambit declined. It is a very reliable setup, and there are very solid systems, and there are really sharp ones as well. Pawn takes d5, e takes d5, bishop to g5, pinning the knight on f6. And you can play very solidly with a move like bishop e6. That's the traditional way of playing. But in a must-win situation, Nepo, play the move bishop b4. This is one of the sharpest possible ways to try to play for a win, putting pressure on the knight on c3. White goes e3. And look at this, h6, questioning the bishop. Bishop goes back, g5, unpinning and attacking the bishop. Bishop g3, knight e4, attacking the knight on c3. White has different ways of playing, but went for the move queen to c2, defending the knight. And now it is this move h5 with ideas to trap the bishop. So white goes for the move f3, knight takes g3, played h takes g3, and well, this kind of variation has been played before by Nepo, so probably this is still something Fabi had prepared for this game. Here, main continuation is to put the queen on e7, attacking the pawn on e3, and well, usually white continues with king f2 with a very sharp game. However, instead of queen e7, bishop e6 is played. Now the move bishop to d3, c6, castling queenside, and here it's the move knight to d7. So what is this position about? Well, you can see that black has advanced the pawns on the king side, is not going to castle on that wing, so probably at some point you would like to evacuate a king to a much safer place. Black has the bishop pair, so that is a long-term advantage. Also, these pawns on the king side, g5 and h5, they can offer black some possibilities in the long run as well. But okay, for now, there are a lot of pieces on the board, and it's all about king safety in the first place. And here, rather than just continuing with a developing move like knight ge2, look at this. f4 is played with the idea to go f5 and trap the bishop. Different ways, different options here to play here as black. Probably taking on f4. Looks like a very sensible continuation. Was not played. Big question is how you should recapture. If you do take with the g-pawn, you're undoubling the pawns. But then it's knight f6, and well, there are holes on e4 and g4. Doesn't look that bad for black at all. Well, in case of recapturing the other way with the e-pawn, well, the bishop comes to g4, for instance. You can allow a check here, but the king on f8 is relatively safe. I guess that this must still have been some part of the home preparation by Fabi, maybe not specifically for this game, but this is incredibly sharp, double-edged. This can go either way. Anyway, instead, rather than taking on f4, Nepo played bishop g4 immediately. Now the knight goes to f3. Still the pawn on f4 can be taken, but black went here for the move queen e7 to attack the pawn on e3, preparing to castle queenside at some point. Well, you have to realize that when your king is on c8, there are potential problems with knight takes d5 as an idea. So anyway, it's white's turn, and look what happened now. e4, opening up the center. You can imagine, if the e-file is open and a rook comes there, well, there will be caused a lot of damage. Well, black decided here to take on c3 to eliminate the piece which is exerting pressure on the center. After queen takes c3, should be clear though, guys, that taking on e4 can just be met by bishop takes e4. This looks great as well because the bishop can't be taken here because of rook h e1 and the queen is lost. So instead there followed bishop takes f3, g takes f3. Now look at this unusual pawn formation, but here I really think that apart from dynamical advantages for white with a safer king's position, I think also the better pawn structure, the fact that you have a bishop versus a knight in quite an open position, it is clear that white is much better. Just after d takes e4, you gotta make a decision how to recapture the pawn. Just with the f-pawn to undouble pawns does make a lot of sense, but even sharper is to take back with the bishop. Very nice idea. Black decided to take here on f4. And well, if you do take back, there is just castling queenside. King is okay, double pawns are ugly, and black also does have an outside passed h-pawn. So this is far from clear. But wait a second, this king is in the center. You don't have to take back at all. There are a lot of tactical possibilities. And one line before showing the game's continuation, I really want to show you this, is bishop takes c6, with the idea that this bishop sacrifice, it cannot be accepted. If you take with the pawn, it's rook h e1, and once again the queen is gone. But you may play rook c8 with a counter pin on the c-file if you think, okay, I can still play d5 so that the bishop is defended, and on the next move there's rook h2 e1 and black's position is falling apart. Well, you got it wrong, because queen e3 is a beautiful defensive move here after forcing the exchange of queens, because after all you're giving a check. If you do take, you take back, and at the end of the day this bishop on c6 will be lost. So you cannot go for immediate tactics, but starting with g4 is an excellent idea, as you are making use of the fact that the h-pawn is pinned. Different ways of playing here, including a move like h4, trying to keep things closed, and who knows, later on that h-pawn can become very important. However, whenever you are under pressure in a situation like this, you really think not about pawns, you think about getting your king to a safer place. Castling queenside was played, maybe the king can come to b8 very soon, but now, rather than taking on h5, there followed this move, d5. Fantastic idea, with the aim of opening up the queenside. Now, there are a lot of problems, including that queen c5 offering the exchange of queens doesn't really work out well for black. You can take on c6, and after exchanging queens on c3, you do take back with the b pawn. Now after b takes c6, I think you can just take on h5, and this endgame is just really bad. While all these pawns are isolated, you also don't really want to take and give white the outside passed h-pawn, especially the double pawns on the f-file are really, really bad. So this is a risk-free advantage for white. Very good chances to convert it. So instead, black got to do something about any of these problems on c6. But if you do play knight c5, there is d6 interfering the line of the queen supporting the knight. And so if you do take on d6, well, there is queen takes h8. The rook is no longer defended. So that is very convincing trick. Well, you may consider queen g5, but there is bishop f5 with another interference, as the queen also this time doesn't protect the knight any longer. Knight e6 can be played, but white is having a great time here. So, for instance, after d7 check, you can't take the pawn, which means that the pawn will stay on the board. You can play king c7, queen e5. White is dominating the center with a huge, if not just winning advantage. So back to the game. After d5, black ignored it by playing the move h4, but this is a sign that things have gone wrong here, because you do take on c6, the pawn cannot be recaptured. There's queen takes c6, and after king goes away, it is checkmate on b7. So what to play now? The knight went to c5. There's no longer this interference motive, but you do give a check on f5 here with the bishop, king to b8. And well, the position is pretty bad for black. But if you do get a chance here to play queen e3 and try to liquidate into some sort of endgame, who knows, maybe you're able to survive or even look for counterplay. Therefore, very nice classy move by white, by Fabiano Caruana. He just moved the king out of a potential check on e3. The king is absolutely safe. It's guarded by his own bishop as well. And the position just looks pretty bad with an open king. So black played here the move b6 to further stabilize the situation of the knight on c5. But now, guys, things are heating up. Look at this, rook to d7. It's one of the most exciting moves of the game, but we are not there yet. Many other things are going to happen. If you do take this rook, there is this move c7 with a double attack. You're going to regain material, and well, there is pawn takes rook. You get this material back, and very soon you set up a deadly mating attack with bishop and queen. So instead, after rook d7, black decided to take with the rook. Now you're not going to take on h8 with check, because that rook, which is hanging on d7, it can simply come back, and well, the game just goes on. Much stronger is to take back with the pawn. So you do have this fantastic asset. You're threatening to take the rook anyway. The rook goes to d8. Now the queen comes to d4. And it's all about the support of that pawn on d7. But black eliminates it with the knight. There's rook to d1 with a huge skewer on this d file. The knight can't move. And for instance, if you do protect with your king, there's no way to immediately exploit that pin on the d file. But you can pick up a pawn on f4, and the position is just very unpleasant. Even if you try something like knight e5, just make sure you don't exchange pieces, but play rook e1, setting up a new pin on this e file. And if you protect your knight, the queen will come away, will come to a4, it will go away to hit the pawn on a7, and also f4 is a threat to win material on the e file. So the king can't really go there. But here Nepo is also showing some really nice resources, as he played here the move queen c5, which seems as if you're just blundering the knight, because if you do take on c5, which was not played, you can take back with the pawn. But here, if you do take on d7 and try to swap everything, well, there's this move h3, and the h-pawn can no longer be stopped. This is a brilliant idea. The alternative is to take with the bishop, but then the king comes to c7 and black regains the piece, and it's just an equal endgame. So let's take it back. White is not going to win the knight, but is just playing the position. He's just having a superior position with dominating major pieces. Queen takes f4 check. Queen goes to c7. Now the queen goes back to d2. So you maintain this pin. Black, look what he did here, Nepo. h3. So here, once again, if you do take that knight, there is this h-pawn, which is a very big problem, because if you don't do anything, let's say something like a3, there's rook takes d7, and the white pieces are getting deflected. If you do take everything, there's h1 queen at the end of the day. Instead, you may move your queen to h6, and everything can just get taken on d7. There's queen takes h2 with check, and white is up a pawn in the queen endgame. But that's not what you're aiming for. White has an overwhelming advantage. He keeps the bishop on the board instead. And the point is that now after a5, the queen comes into d5, threatening checkmate on a8. So therefore, the king goes to a7, so the rook covers that square. Now the pawn is hanging, so we have a new pin along the 7th rank as well. h2 is played, white is a pawn up. Better pieces and also connected passed pawns. Queen h7 is a very nice technical move guarding the h1 square. King to b8. White goes a3. Nice move as well, so that there will be never any problems with your king. At least that is what you're thinking. But players are in time trouble, reaching move 40. There are only a few minutes left, and Nepo continues with ideas to look for tricks. He played here the move queen to e5. Note that the knight cannot be taken because then you're giving up the control over the promotion square. So white is playing queen h6, attacking the pawn there on b6, queen c7 back. And now you can just bring up your own pawn. Excellent move. Rook g8, rook h1. You're just controlling that h-pawn. After knight to c5, well, here you got to understand that taking the pawn on h2 is not a good idea because everything will be swapped. And this rook endgame should be defendable for black. And well, the same if you do take with the rook instead. There's knight takes e4, and after rook takes g5. If you do take the rook on h2 will be hanging, and probably white is just going to save the game. But there are so many things to play here. I mean, you don't want to trade off the bishop for the knight. So why not just drop back with the bishop to c2? I always like bishops being placed on 2 squares distance so that you're avoiding any sort of tricks. You can play always moves like g6 or just take the pawn on h2 later. Just placing the pawn on g6 does make sense here so that it will be defended by the bishop as well. I think white is just completely winning here now. But Fabi, he is just a big calculator. He plays it in a very concrete way. Goes for the move bishop h7, probably with the aim of kicking the rook away and then play g6, g7 and promote the pawn. But look at this. Nepo on move 39 takes on g5. This is an exchange sacrifice, eliminating the most dangerous pawn of white. Queen takes g5, queen takes h7 with check. It's move 40. The players got 30 minutes extra on the clock. But here Fabi didn't really take his time and played almost instantly. Well, maybe he fought a minute or two, I don't know. But very quickly he played his move king to a1. But it is much better to put the king on a2. This is not easy to see, but for a classy player like Fabi, this should be doable in a practical game. The thing is that he didn't play it because of queen f7. And now this move, king a1 is a very good move because knight b3 is not an issue. You put a king on b1, there's no good check because now after queen h7 there's king a2, and here you see that the knight on b3 is even hindering a check on f7, and white on the next move after black moves the knight away, you play queen g3 check and you will wrap up the pawn. This should be winning. But look at this, guys. Now things are just getting absolutely insane. White played king a1 and now queen c2, defending the pawn again with your queen. That means that the rook on h1 is out of play. And the attempt to win that pawn by playing queen e5, for instance, also queen g3 is possible. But let's say after queen e5, check, king to b7. If you do take with your queen now and offer the exchange of queens, all of a sudden there is this move knight b3 check. And after king a2, you just go knight c1, and this is a repetition of moves. There's no possibility to take on c1 because it's queen takes h2 and the queen is gone. The alternative, instead of taking with the queen on h2, is to take with the rook, but that does allow queen d1 check, king a2, and this is a repetition as well. So queen c2 has two ideas: to support the pawn on h2, making it harder for white to activate that rook, and there is knight b3 as an idea. Therefore queen g8 is played, check, king goes away, and now white played here the move king a2, so knight b3 doesn't come with check. What should be played here? Well, Nepo found a brilliant idea. It's the move a4. Maybe brilliant is a bit exaggerated, but it's a very good attacking move because the pawn is playing a crucial role, can support potential checks. Maybe the knight can come in at some point. There are other ideas as well. White, well, cannot do too much. Just pushed the pawn here to f4. And now, how should black proceed? Very complicated position. But apparently something like king a6 is the best move. I don't think many people would have found this idea because it feels like you're enabling white always to give a check on a8. But apparently the king is quite okay, as the queen also got to stay on this diagonal to guard its own king, which means that for now the pawn on h2, it will stay on the board, and if you just continue pushing your pawn, it's knight d3, and there's also a mating threat, and if queen supports it, well, there's also a queen c4 check later if the queen leaves this g8 square. So there's a lot of counterplay, and queen a8, king b5, this is only probably leading to a repetition of moves, while after something like rook b1, it looks like your queen is guarding the promotion square, but there's knight c1 check, and now you're interfering on the back rank. And if you go back with your king to a1, it's knight b3, back and forth, and black is saving the game. But this was all not played because Nepo went here for the move knight b3 immediately. But then it's queen g7 check. That's why you should have started with king a6. Now king a6 was played, but here it's queen c3, offering the exchange of queens, which is of course something you cannot permit here as black. Queen g2 played, attacking the rook, but now after queen c4 check, the king goes back to b7, and it's rook to e1. Brilliant idea, because black cannot promote a pawn. It's rook e7 check, and the king will be pushed backwards, and it's checkmate in 2 moves. So instead, knight c5 was played. Now, funnily enough, rook e7 is no longer such a good idea, because after king c6, apparently there are no good checks, and black is threatening to promote a pawn. Once again, we have seen it in earlier videos of the FIDE Candidates event. The knight is just a brilliant defender when it's very near the king. So instead of rook e7, white played queen f1, offering exchange of queens and controlling the promotion square. Queen goes back to d5, check, king to b1, excellent idea. And here you gotta watch out as black, because queen h1 is a brilliant idea to force the exchange of queens because of the skewer. So there follow the move queen f5, king to a1, and once again, if you do play knight b3, king a2, the king is temporarily safe here because there's not a good check. So instead, Nepo found this idea. He played the move queen c2, looking for new ideas. White goes f5, looking for ways to promote that pawn. But now, knight b3, king a2 doesn't lead anywhere, but knight d3 threatening checkmate in 1, as well as the rook on e1 is a brilliant resource. Don't think that you can defend the threat by attacking the queen with rook e2, because it does allow the move queen takes e2. With the deflection motive, you're promoting the h-pawn and your material up, and will even win the queen as well. So things are just going horribly wrong if you play rook e2. But Fabi played immediately rook b1, defending the pawn. Everything is under control, and white is just 3 moves away from getting a new queen. Knight c5, f6, knight b3, king a2, knight d2. Whew! Forking the queen and rook. What to do? Give a check. It's a tempo game, guys. Every move really matters. It's check. King goes away, and now also the rook goes away. Attacking the queen. If the queen goes away, queen b3, the king goes to a1. And, well, there are ideas, of course, to go for rook c7 and play for checkmate very soon. But after queen e6, what should be played? Knight b3 is an idea. You don't want to lose the pawn. Well, maybe in hindsight, a better idea compared to the game's continuation is rook d1. Play it safe, because after knight b3, you put your king there. There are no good checks. If you do give a check, it's king a2 again. If you do take on f6, pawn on h2 can be taken, and white untangles. And when play is just on one wing with a rook versus a knight and pawn still on the board, well, that should just be winning for white. But here Fabi, being down to 1 minute at this point, fought for a bit, played rook c7 check, and after king a6, it looks as if you can infiltrate either to one of these squares, but after a check, the king is on b5, and all of a sudden, there's no good follow-up because there's no check. And if you play a random move, there's queen e1 followed by checkmate on b1. So instead, no queen e8. White played the move f7. Knight b3 check, king to b1. What is happening here? Nepo played instantly the move queen f5, a very human move. But the machine says you can play here this move. Knight to d2 check. If you go back to a1, it's knight b3 with repetition. The only way to keep on playing is king c2, but then a bunch of checks can be given here, and you can even sacrifice the knight. You're not going to take the rook because then the pawn will be promoted, but there's no way out for the king. There's always going to be a perpetual here. So that is an extremely amazing idea, I would say. But queen f5 played. Let's see what's going on. King a2, knight c5. If you do take the pawn on h2, it is queen d5 check, and after the king goes back, it is queen d1 with a repetition of moves, whereas the queen will come to b3 next. Instead, after knight c5, there followed queen a8, king b5, queen c6, king a6, And here, the moves were repeated just to gain time. These 30 seconds are extremely important at this point. But how should white continue here? Well, this is the last moment in the game, big moment, where Fabi had a huge chance. He could have given a check on e8, with the point that the king can't run away because of queen takes a4, and that gives some space for the king. I mean, the king is absolutely safe now. The pawn is no longer there. If you play the more critical move, king a6, then it's queen e2 with check. And all of a sudden, you do have ideas even to wrap up this pawn on h2. If you play knight d3, it is queen takes h2, and there's not going to be a perpetual here any longer. If you do play b5 instead, well, this is probably what Fabi was struggling with. You're not going to play queen takes h2 now because there's queen d5, and once again the queen will come to d1. There's not a knight on d3 standing in the way compared to the previous line. But after b5, rook c6 is a brilliant move, and there is no safe place to hide for the black king, because if you go to b7, it's queen takes b5, and this should be checkmate in a few moves. If you do play something else, let's say king to a5, it's queen d2 check. And this is also going to be checkmate, while the alternative is king a7, then the queen comes to e7, and you're pushing the knight back, but then it's also just really bad because the queen will come to e3, and you're consolidating, and you also have threats against the king. So this would have been technically winning for white, but instead there followed queen c6, another repetition of moves. But here Fabi had a different plan. He goes for rook to e7, guarding potential checks on the e file. The queen is still covering the h1 square, but black activates the queen here with the move queen f1, threatening queen to c4. Queen a8, king b5, queen e8. Here king a6 was played, queen a8, king b5, and well, what to do here as white? You may consider a move like f8 queen when you're queen up, but there is queen c4, and the repetition of moves is inevitable. After king b1, it's queen d3. If you go to the a file, we have the same sort of checks again. If you do play king c1, which is a huge blunder, there is knight b3 with checkmate. So also f8 queen is not a possibility. There is queen c4 as a threat. White first felt, okay, I need to insert this check on e8. Good idea. There's king to a6. And I was analyzing this a bit. If you just go back now to e1 to attack the queen and guard the square, well, the problem is there is h1 queen. And you do take on f1, and you can get a new queen now. But then again, it's this queen c4. This stupid idea, it's always there. Sorry for my bad words, was not my intention. But from White's perspective, you really feel so annoyed facing this idea. After king b1, queen d3, it's the same repetition of moves because king c1 is knight b3 again. So Fabi, in desperate need of finding a way to continue the game here, just went for the move rook to e4. And well, you're hoping that black is just careless and plays here a move like h1 queen, because then the main point is that you do have a check on a8 and king b5. It's rook b4 with checkmate. That's the main point of getting the rook to the 4th rank. But of course, black has the simple idea of just eliminating that that rook. And well, white's plan was now to take on a4 with check. So the king got to go back. It's queen takes e4, king a7. And well, both sides still have a passed pawn, which is about to become a queen. White just gives a number of checks and eventually decides to promote a pawn. Black gives up its own queen and get a new queen himself. And then, well, we have this endgame of 2 versus 1. All of a sudden, all the chaos is over. It's just a technical queen endgame. But does white have realistic winning chances here? Well, there is definitely a way to keep on trying here with the move a4. There's a check on d5, king a3. So that you're standing on the diagonal of your queen is a typical technique in queen endgames. But after queen d3, black is going to provoke the white pawns to come forward. And there are a number of checks here. But in fact, white is not really going to make progress. Also, the pawn is well protected. The queen is well placed, nicely centralized. There are always potential checks as well. So white goes back, hopes to exchange some queens. Some pawn endgames they are potentially winning. But not much is happening here. Now the pawn is on the 4th rank. That means that the queen also got to stay closer to the king. Because once you activate your queen to get closer to the black king, there will follow a bunch of checks. But here, there is no way to make any progress. So the game continued for 10 more moves or so. But here, it is just a very dramatic situation that the game ends in a draw. And that means that both players, they are not the new winner of the FIDE Candidates tournament. On move 109, players looking at each other, reluctantly shaking hands eventually. That was just very painful outcome of this game for both. You can't blame them. This is how chess works, guys. They really tried hard, but they also both made some huge mistakes, big blunders. Dramatic things were happening. They had their chances, especially Fabi. Frankly speaking, Nepo never had a chance to win here in this game. But also for him, it was like a painful affair. Like he really needed to play for a win, but it didn't work out. So what happened here? These two guys are not the winner of the event. That other game between Hikaru Nakamura and Gukesh played very solidly, surprised the opponent with a nice solid system in the opening, and that really posed some practical problems. And also in that game, Gukesh never got really into trouble. Hikaru tried for a long time, never had an advantage along the way. So that game ended in a draw, which means that 17 years old Gukesh from Chennai, India, is the winner of the FIDE Candidates 2024. This is a big moment in chess history. With only 17 years old, he has the possibility now to become the new world champion by playing the reigning world champion in a match probably taking place later this year. An absolutely incredible performance. He, as I said in one of my videos earlier, I think he played incredible chess. He stayed very cool in the entire event. I think he just lost only one game to Alireza Firouzja. But apart from that, he showed his class, almost didn't make any serious mistakes. Also put a lot of pressure on his opponents in most of the games and is the deserved winner. So no tie breaks needed. He just ends with half a point more than its main rivals. What an amazing event. I would like to thank you all for tuning in to this FIDE Candidates. Maybe at some point I will cover another game if I'm in a good mood. You must imagine also that I'm quite exhausted covering all these games, as most of the games they were played in the night for me, so I was staying up late. Even this video is like 3:30 or so. This is not what I would like to do every day, but anyway, your support, it also pushes me to keep on going, and I would like to thank you all, not only for the views or the subscriptions, also the small donations, the big donations being made via PayPal are really appreciated, guys. So please keep that coming in. If you want to help me a bit, you can find the PayPal link in the description under this video. Thanks for doing that. Just hit the subscribe button if you're in a good mood as well. Spread this channel among your friends, and I will cover many more exciting games in the near future as well. See you soon again. Bye bye.